Hello everyone, and happy Ranavim, uh, and welcome to this first ever podcast. And today we have a very special guest, Dr. Ankit Shah, who I believe don't need really much of introduction, but for those that are not that familiar with him, he is a economical and political expert. Oh, we are not live. Hello, can everyone tell me if we are running live? Because I have been just told that I'm not.
The
Can
screen shows live.
okay. So every can someone tell me from the subscriber base we are live? Perfect. So let's just go back to the introduction. Perfect. So as I mentioned, Dr. Ankit Shah is a geoeconomical and geopolitical analyst, and he is also a chartered consultant. He came up with a number of books, but I think the one that is maybe mostly awaited is on Sanatan economics, and also he's quite famous as a result of his very precise predictions, such as Russian-Ukrainian war or Article 370. Welcome, Dr. Ankit Shah.
Dhanyavad. Jai Shri Ram.
Thank you so much for your time and for you to come to this channel and be with the audience. They were all very excited. But before everyone, before we jump into the conversation, I just wanted to introduce myself a bit for those that don't know me. I run this channel, and it's a reaction channel, and it came out as a result of my interest, first of all, in spirituality, and I believe that India is a cradle of spirituality. And secondly, obviously, I outside of YouTube have a job, and I've been observing the rise of India, and that also sparked my curiosity in the culture. What I really want to stress to everyone here today, that this is not a political channel. I'm not a political figure. I'm not associated with any party, nor I am aspiring to. And this is also not a media channel. So I just kind of want everyone to bear that in mind, and just to kind of manage the expectations. We will have a conversation with Dr. Shah, and then towards the end, we'll take some questions. So I would kindly ask you to postpone your questions towards towards the end of this podcast. So fantastic, Dr. Shah. Again, a pleasure to have you here. And, you've retweeted my reaction video, and this is kind of how I wanted to start this podcast. And I found it very interesting and thought-provoking, the concept that you have presented. And I wanted to start right there at the Sanatan economics. And I just wanted to quite a bit understand from your end, like, where did that come from? Like, who is, I don't know if it's India, if this is something that you guys are, very much aware of. I've read some parts where that the word economics actually is coming from, I guess, Sanskrit. So you guys were the first to use that, but it would be really interesting if you could start off with that, and let us understand on the principles, etc.
So, thank you for inviting me over here. This is the first time I'm doing a podcast with a foreign YouTube channel. So, uh,
Amazing.
it's been a pleasure for me as well. Now, before we get into how this word got coined, I'd like to take you to the roots of uh, where some portion of economic history came into place. So this is the first ever what we call as the Arthashastra. So ancient Bharat produced the first ever document. Now people in India, they get confused with understanding that this document is purely economics. No,
Okay.
Arthashastra as a literature is about entire statecraft, not just economics.
Okay.
Economics is one portion of it. Okay,
Yes.
but this is the first ever traceable record of human civilization, something about economics. Okay,
Wow.
so India is the beginner for that. Okay, now when I coined this word Sanatan economics, I think I started the thought process began around 2013 when I could see how what in my understanding what I call as the Abrahamic economic models.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I could see that these models have begun collapsing. That is the point in time my interest got triggered into what exactly was this ancient Bharat economics,
Okay.
which produced more than 27% on an average GDP to the entire world for 2000, I mean 1800 years out of the last 2000 years. So that is 85% of human history that we have on record. So if you are giving 27% to the global GDP on an average for 85% of the last recorded history, there has to be some model. It cannot be that it just happened by some coincidence. Okay. Now, fascinating part is India did not go outside the continent and attack any country during this period. India did not have one language during this period that
Okay.
it imposed on anybody. And India also did not have a single country reserve currency that it imposed on anybody. So, no single country reserve currency, no common language, and no attack outside the continent.
Hmm.
And despite that, you are giving 27% to the world GDP. Okay.
Wow.
So there got to be some institution which is so thoroughly planned and designed that it makes this possible. So to my understanding, that institution was the Mandir. The Mandir ecosystem is what I call it. Okay.
Cool.
Now, the criticism is that the West will say that we gave you all the institutions because after colonialism, what happened was the entire infrastructure or the entities that we have today is simply a cut, copy, paste of the English model or whatever that you call it. And now that the mandirs remain in a dilapidated, destroyed, and those kind of conditions, more many of them because of invasions, people do not have the memory of how important this institution was. So we take down that criticism as okay, you gave us institutions without even realizing that what was working for 1800 years.
And
So
and when
this
it
thought process
yeah, sorry.
So this thought process triggered in my mind that from 2013 I started writing uh, on my Facebook post and Twitter and other places that there are big gaps in what is going on right now in the world in terms of Abrahamic economics. And I see that ancient Bharat principles can reverse these gaps. Okay. That is how I coined this word Sanatan economics because any economic model that is designed with a thought process that I am the most powerful country, I am going to impose this format on everybody,
Mm-hmm.
and that is why my economists need to win the Nobel prizes, and that is how the economics of the world will function. This is a hegemony mindset and or
Mm-hmm.
there is the Adam Smith capitalism converting into an arrogance domination format, and then there is other format which is totally a victim mentality that no, the rest of the world is dominating, so the only model I have is equitable distribution of wealth, which
Okay.
is the Karl Marx communism asking for freebies from the government. Let's
Mm-hmm.
control everybody, loot them, and let redistribute the wealth. Okay. So my understanding is that the human society cannot have an economic model which is based on a hegemony mindset or
Mm-hmm.
a victimhood mindset. Both of these are wrong models because the first model generated about 60% divorce rates and the second model generated about 60% slave population. Okay. So both of these are wrong, and we need to get somewhere in the middle. And the model has to be such that it works over centuries. It should not run out of fuel,
Hmm.
which is why this word Sanatan was added to economics. That is why I coined that word, that it should work for life cycles, not just for one life. Okay?
I see.
So this is the basic difference.
Okay, so when you would compare that, and gosh, so many questions, and like the viewers were sending me so many questions, it's so hard to even pin down. So when you would compare so is first of all, is this model something that is already in existence in India, or is it something that you would want India to adopt or the world to adopt?
Um, to my understanding, despite the fact that a lot of a lot of elements are destroyed in a way
Mm-hmm.
or depreciated in a way, um, it still exists in some rural portions.
Okay.
Okay, uh, these are tier three areas or tier three mindset where we call them unorganized and illiterate people
Okay.
because that's what the Western template automatically labels them. So I believe that the model is functioning in some proportion somewhere in some corners.
Okay, interesting. And you just mentioned about tier one. I've been obviously reacting to the cultural videos, trying to learn as much as I can about India before coming for a trip to India. Um, Everyone talks about tier one, tier two, tier three cities. Would you be just able to very quickly? I know it's a tiny bit of a diversion, but like, help me out what that actually means.
So uh, tier one cities, I'll give you a broad brushing of what I understand as tier one. All
Mm-hmm.
those cities who have which are now called or labeled as modern infrastructure,
Mm-hmm.
where the rich people live, where the educated people live, based on definitions of the Western template.
I see.
And these cities were established by breaking the family unit,
Yeah.
the corpus of the family unit, and passing on the capital to the companies, and they themselves becoming jobbers. This is
Mm-hmm.
how the cities were designed or established, which is why I call all fiat, all tier one cities as fiat dollar cities, be it
Okay.
any country.
Okay. And so when it comes to then the tier three, is that like a specific, because you kind of mentioned that there is a mindset. What would that be?
So this is a self-employment and an entrepreneurship model mindset. These are the people who are not okay with the British classroom format, which was introduced across all colonies,
Mm-hmm.
which is why they just be aside and continue with the traditional models of learning and scaling and earning money. These are the tier three people who work on the in the core sectors of farming, food processing, manufacturing,
I
those
see.
kind of stuff.
I see. Cool. And if we go back to the economics now, you're talking about the Gurukul and Mandir system. Would you be, because there were many questions that came through, and people are asking to explain how you envision this is how this is going to, work, and maybe I don't know if you could take us through the history, like why it was important, why the temples were rich, etc.
Hmm.
That would be
Hmm.
helpful.
Yeah. So the basic difference from where all this comes is the Abrahamic religious idea of only one life,
Okay.
which translates into your daily behavior and all the models of business and living lifestyle
Mm-hmm.
based on that one life concept. Now, if you believe that this is the only one life,
Mm-hmm.
wherein you say that you are the body and soul is just a vehicle,
Mm-hmm.
Sanatan economics says that you are the soul and body is just a vehicle. So the fundamental mindset difference in Abrahamic economics and Sanatan economics is in Abrahamic economics, you want to consume everything right away at whatever the cost, because this is the only life and you got to win. In Sanatan economics model, it is more about preservation rather than consumption.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm to give one word of difference between the two, Abrahamism is more about consumption, Sanatan is more about preservation.
Okay.
Abrahamic economics is more about one life, Sanatan economics is more about life cycles.
Mm-hmm.
So it is very obvious that if you are living an Abrahamic economics life, you are already a high debt based country. So people are going to use credit cards, take loans, consume it right now, pass on the debt to the next generation. Okay, that's the Abrahamic economics model.
Mm-hmm.
In Sanatan economics model, you save more, you consume less, you take care of your aged parents, you don't rely on the state to take care of your parents. You're going to make savings so that the next generation can complete their education without taking any loans. That is the Sanatan economics model, which is exactly why I say that the entire narrative of brain drain, which the media says about India, is actually fake. It was not the NRIs or the non-resident Indians which went to foreign countries. It's not that they were intelligent, that's why they were so successful. It is because their concept of finance comes from Sanatan economics, which is why they have the lowest divorce rates, they have lowest consumption, highest savings, they take care of their parents, they complete education of the next generation without taking any loans. and
Mm-hmm.
and that is why it is based on the dharmic principles. In fact, in our marriage as well, if you see the fairas, there's a round and circling that you have to go around the fire while taking the oaths of marriage. It resembles sun in between and planets circling around.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it resembles that because you're trying to say that all I'm going to take is just duties for each other. There
Mm-hmm.
is no mention of any rights over there. So Sanatan economic society is a duty-based society. Abrahamic economic society is a rights-based society. Okay.
Okay.
Now
How do you
we
mean right?
also got to,
How do you
yeah.
mean rights based?
It's a rights-based society in the sense if you are thinking that you are going to take debt right now and the next generation is going to pay that debt.
Okay.
Okay. You are spending on yourself right now. It's just an example of what a rights-based society translates into because it focuses on material factor of production. So
Mm-hmm.
it will attack countries. It will create mob objectives because Abrahamic religions is about blanket treatment of difference of treatment between believers and non-believers. Just like that, they do geopolitics as well. They
Mm-hmm.
make a group of nations against another group. They convert the nations and bring them into that particular in their group, which
Mm-hmm.
is the constant question which our foreign minister gets. Why don't you join our group? Okay, why are you going to the BRICS nations? Okay, so this is how Sanatan says no, that's not how we operate. Okay, we operate topic wise and issue based, value based. Each time we will select what we want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's the strategic autonomy. It's a traditional Sanatan culture,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not with the Abrahamics. In the Abrahamics, it's a top-down approach of commandments. So if US says this has to be done, that has to be done by all the allies. Okay, so
Okay.
that's their model of geopolitics based on Abrahamic values. That's not how Sanatan operates. Okay, so this we are seeing regime change operations in countries, puppet regime being set, their policies being dominated with that superpower model, and then policies designed by the West for those nations, domination, exploitation of their resources, and stuff like that. So because again everything is based on consumption, so they derive words like gun culture,
Mm-hmm.
they derive words like war economy. They see economy in war. Okay. This is
Yeah.
a problem with Abrahamic economics. Again, as I said, the Abrahamic economics is focusing on material factor of production, which is exactly why the Gulf nations today realize that the free crude oil stock that is coming out from their soil is going to be relevant for only 15, 20 years. What they will do after that one life,
Mm.
right? So this
Yeah.
is what happens with Abrahamic economics. In Sanatan economics, the focus is on the man factor of production. That everything else in the world is good, you have to fix yourself. This is Sanatan model.
Okay.
Okay. So when you are working on the manufacture of production, you are ensuring that everything is not exploited to an extent that nothing will remain for the next generation.
Mhm.
Okay. So what happens in the Sanatan economics model is, say for example, if I'm to elementarily, if I'm going to divide a society into how it operates, one is a state, which is the government. Second part is the companies. Third part is the families. And the
Mhm.
fourth part is community. Okay. Now, Sanatan economics says that the world, the richest people in the world, the top 100 richest people in the world, should be none of these four.
Mhm.
It should be the murtis in the mandir who should be the richest,
Okay.
because any of the four sections of the society becoming the richest in the world is damaging for the planet. This is what Sanatan economics says.
Okay.
So families should not fall into the richest 100 people. Companies should not fall into the richest 100 in in the world.
See. Mhm.
The government should not fall into the richest 100 in the world. And similarly, the community should not fall into the richest 100. It should be the murti which is in the mandir should be the richest of all, because that will not damage the planet. Okay. Now, when we say that the mandir ecosystem,
Yeah.
the entire economics is planned in a way that it is integrated with the mandir activities. So the cash flow is happening because of the festivals and the tithis of the mandir activities. So what happens is, say for example, there is a birth in a family. Say for example, there is marriage in the family. The entire procession will move from one mandir to a second mandir, and in that procession, the entire stuff cash flow will happen of trade. Okay, and all these festivals are such products which are seasonal. Okay, so
Mhm.
no capitalist is going to put up an industry for those products.
Mhm.
So when Adam Smith came with this idea of capitalism, what that translated into was, it's told that, say suppose there are 15 families producing 15 different design of shirts.
Mhm.
So Adam Smith comes out of nowhere and says, let us have economies of scale and benefits of division of labor.
Yeah.
So 14 designs were removed from the market. The 14 families were told that from tomorrow you will become my jobber. I'm going to put up a factory and hand me over all the savings that you have. I'll buy machines out of it. So eventually, what happens with this kind of Abrahamic economics is, 5% people holding 90% wealth of the country.
Mhm.
Okay.
It's very true.
Uh, yeah. So Sanatan economics is those mandir related festivals which are seasonal, and the entire trade is integrated in a way that none of those products can be produced on a mass scale for economies of scale. So no capitalist will be attracted ever.
Mhm.
So only small family unit entrepreneurship model functions.
Mhm.
And the entire cash flow in the system happens in a way where the money from the pockets of the rich people goes to the pockets of poor people in a celebratory format without even the rich person realizing that the money went. Okay. So in Abrahamic economics, what happens is once 90% wealth is gets accumulated with 5% people, the government starts putting gun on people's head, collecting taxes and distributing freebies to the people, which is a wrong way to go about. Okay, because once the exploitation happened in the 18th century industrialization, it was after that Karl Marx was born. He said, now that you have already done exploitation of the people, now I want for free.
Mhm.
Okay. So when he asks for free, we don't like it when people ask free things from the government. But we got to understand that first you allowed Adam Smith to do so much exploitation of the people. After that, they are asking for free. Okay. Which is why both the models are wrong.
Okay, and so in terms of the Mandir economy, so I'm just trying to picture in my head because obviously I'm trying to look at it from my side of the world and where I live and my little knowledge of India that I have. So it is evident that you guys have a lot of festivals. So I guess I see how that. But what happens outside of the festival? How would that work?
It still works because you have a family unit entrepreneurship model. So, which is why I say that the British colonialism, with which the single country reserve currency status established the classrooms worldwide, they ensured that the human beings are trapped in four walls for 15 long years, so that a totally blank slave comes out of that classroom and he has no other option but to join a job. And when you look at the parents today, now that they realize that their children is the worst investment because of this model, they go and invest into stocks instead of passing the seed fund of entrepreneurship to the children. Okay, which is why this entire 400 years cycle of single country reserve currency status, which imposed this Abrahamic economics capitalism model, is wrong. Okay, the parents are supposed to invest their savings for the seed funding of the startups of their children, and the children are not supposed to waste those 15 years within four walls in a classroom giving a test for memory, which is no real use in the market at all. Okay, so it was a colonial agenda of the British that they didn't want people to question them for independence, so they designed this human trafficking from classroom to jobs.
Interesting, interesting. I'm just so how realistic do you reckon this is when it comes to implementation, let's say in India? Because my mind goes on miles like how would that even we obviously in the West we don't really have temples, we don't have, this type of thing. But when before we went live, you guys, just so you know, we're talking about that. I like the Sanatan economics because in the West, what's right now happening in the companies is that there is a strong push on sustainability and ESG, and it's indexed as well. And every CEO needs to show that they're sustainable. So to me, that Sanatan economic concept sounded almost similar, like what the West is trying to do. And it would be interesting to see like how you feel like that could be implemented in India, and then how that could apply to the rest of the world, considering that there are certain forces behind significantly trying to drive sustainability in the companies that work for it. It's a huge thing.
Yeah. So, as far as Bharat is concerned, my understanding is that the revival of the Mandir ecosystem has just begun. As I say, 22nd January 2024, Ram Mandir, I say it's the civilizational independence day of Bharat. Okay. So, this is just, I think people are still not aware of the importance of the Mandir ecosystem. And this is only just one part of the Sanatan economics model. There
Okay.
are four more ecosystems as well, which all need to fall into correct place to get back to that ancient Bharat levels. Now, people are now understanding after Ayodhya Ram Mandir,
Mhm.
the talks are coming that this has generated so much dollars of tourism. This has generated so much dollars of trade. I think more and more mandirs will get revived, and in that process, people will realize that this is a formidable economic model, because you see all the ancient mandir towns are still thriving. Something can happen to an industrial town in Detroit. Something can happen to California. Something can happen to New York. Something can happen to London, Paris, Berlin, but nothing happens to a mandir town. And it's proven. Tirupati is as it is, Kashi is as it is, Ayodhya will be as it is, Mathura will be as it is. Nothing will ever happen because the economic model is self devised for preservation.
Hmm.
Because of that uh, festival and mandir activities that continuously go on. Now, each of our Bhagwan, that the deity that seats in the mandir, you will notice each of them have a there are different kinds of things that you need to put there in devotion. So there will be a different kind of a fruit, a different kind of a leaf, a different kind of a rice species. Okay, so what that shows is that entire biodiversity is maintained because each of the deity requires different things. Imagine if all the deities would require the same flower, what will happen to other kinds of flowers? They will all vanish.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this mandir as a unit is actually a biodiversity preservation maintenance equipment. Okay, so each of the Bhagwan have their own bird. Each of the Bhagwan have their own animal. If you look at the photos of those Bhagwans, okay, it's talking about biodiversity it's by itself. And I actually do believe that a lot of biodiversity the world has lost is because of the destruction of the Bharatiya mandirs. There are still mandirs who still feed, they will feed rats, they will feed monkeys, right? Because this society was, as I said, it's all about preservation. Now, somebody who's going to chant those mantra and then drink water, that small kid is never going to waste water.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who's going to chant mantra and then eat food because that food becomes to their mind sacred, they
Mm-hmm.
will never waste that food. Okay. Today is the day of Ram Navami. This is the birth date of Bhagwan Ram. So
Mm-hmm.
the concept of birthday celebration comes from ancient Bharat. It does not come from the West. Okay. But look at the primary difference between Abrahamic economics and Sanatan economics. In our birthdays, we are not supposed to throw food at each other. That is what the West does. They throw cakes at each other. Okay. To us, food is sacred. Okay.
Interesting.
So uh, there are fundamental difference between the two models.
It's interesting because when you were talking about the Abrahamic economy, and obviously I come from this culture, it's I'm not too sure, and throughout my figuring out how trying to figure out like what is India about, how what is the culture. Um, Obviously it's very diverse, and I don't think I've even realized before I started this journey how diverse this is, but equally Europe is diverse, maybe not as hugely as India. And so when you talk about like the one alive concept, I agree. Like that's I think that you can hear it amongst people. You only have a one life, and you live one life. However, I do believe that people are looking at the sustainable solutions, and they are looking at things from like what about the next generations. And also when I'm because I'm personally from Slovakia, and Slovakia is a very small country in the Central Europe. And so as I've been learning about India, I came to find out that there are a lot of I would say not cultural, but there are similarities. So, for example, when you're talking about savings,
Mhm.
that is how I was brought up. Like, you never go on debt. Like, that's not the culture in Slovakia. So that these things have also been, here. And I wouldn't think that perhaps the food is sacred here, but we definitely don't throw cakes at each other. Maybe that's in the US, but certainly I was drawing some differences that and I was trying to understand like, okay, one life concept, I got this, but it doesn't feel like everywhere in Europe, where not all nations, as you know, in Europe we're created equal, and uh, we kind of come all from Indo-European,
So
like.
to my understanding, it is the this influence of the Western template is more towards the west of Europe. I
Hmm.
don't think the Eastern Europe carry those similar traits to that extent, at least for sure. Which is why you see a lot of the Western countries who have deployed women for temporary GDP as a unit of labor, which is what was the goal of the British classroom format. Uh, they all have lost their birth rates and now have imported illegal radicals, choicest people from the West Asia, and the consequences are visible on streets because of that.
It's
So China has lost the birth rates, Japan has lost the birth rates, a lot of Western Europe has lost the birth rates, US has lost the birth rates, Russia also has lost the birth rates because this job format as an empowerment model came with a single country reserve currency status in the last 400 years. Before that, humanity did not consider a job model as a priority outcome of the skills based learning that they used to have.
yeah, interesting, interesting. And how do you, you're, I would love to understand a bit more about the Gurukula system and how do you envision that? How is that to work?
Mhm. So it is very important that there are some categories of transactions which have to happen through the Murti of the Bhagwan. And Gurukul education system particularly falls into that category. Because if students are going to pay hefty fees to the teachers, first, they are not going to respect the teachers much because they see it as a service provider customer kind of a relationship rather than learning something for lifelong. Okay. So that is not what ancient Bharat was about. In ancient Bharat, Guru Dakshina, which is the fees, was supposed to be paid only after the student successfully demonstrates the skills for which he came there to learn. Okay. Most of these Gurukuls were campuses within the Mandir campus. Okay. Why? Because it has to happen within nature so that when that kid grows up, does
Hmm.
not exploit nature for profits. So that entire 10, 12, 15 years of learning has to happen in raw nature living kind of a format around the Mandir ecosystem.
I see.
Okay. The fees are supposed to be sponsored by the community and not the student or his parents. Okay. Which means that whatever the people are giving to the mandir, that will be deployed for running the livelihood of the gurus, the teachers. Teachers are not supposed to ask money from the students.
Okay.
So the Adam Smith, so-called Adam Smith capitalism arrogance gets immediately striked out because of that, because the money is moving through the murti. Okay. And the entitlement of Karl Marx asking for freebies, that entitlement also gets cancelled out because now that you are not paying any fees, there is nothing that you can demand out of the way from the guru or
Mhm.
the facilities that you are getting there. Okay, so every kid is at an equal level, whether it's from coming from a rich family or a poor family, does not matter at all. Okay, so Karl Marx entitlement is also being striked out over there, which is why I say Sanatan economics model get plugs all the gaps of
Interesting.
the arrogance of Adam Smith and the entitlement of Karl Marx. And
Interesting.
it is
So,
the Murti which, and the Murti is what does it actually.
uh-huh.
Nobody else but the Murti of the Bhagwan.
And so when is the book coming out?
So it is still in process because I want it to be in a way where the book continuously contributes across centuries. So, and this is just a seed thought process from my end.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm expecting after reading the book, there will be 500, 1,000, God knows how many authors who will delve more, do a deep dive into ancient Bharat and maybe add much more things.
I see, I see. Okay, so let's now shift the gears because there were also a lot of questions that came about the dollarization and the financial
Mhm.
reset. And I think it would be great to understand like when, because you made a lot of predictions about like the West, we're not going to have jobs here, everything is going to move to Bharat. And I just wanted to understand like when do you predict the financial reset is going to happen and what is the kind of impact of that on Europe and on Bharat?
Well, to my understanding, the Ukraine conflict is a part of this de-dollarization script
How?
because if if they actually wanted to stop de-dollarization, they would have done a war with maybe China or Russia. But since, as I say, I've been saying since 2 years that since US is aligned on de-dollarization process, they picked Ukraine. Okay, so these were all the partitions which were done to carry on the single country reserve currency status. So Europe standing at Russian borders, Russia standing at Chinese borders, China standing at Indian borders, India standing at Pakistan borders, right? Pakistan standing at Afghanistan borders, Afghanistan standing at Iran borders, Iran standing at Iraq borders. Okay, so each of the country was told that your neighbor is a rogue country, and we are going to sanction them, which means by default you have to continue with the US dollar. That is what it translates into. So one bucket of nations were given arms and dollars. Second bucket of nations were given sanctions. This is how the single country reserve currency status of pound and dollar continued for the last 400 years. This is how they created the artificial hotspots of Ukraine, Taiwan, POK, Iran, Israel, and North Korea, South Korea. Okay. Now that dollar is no more, I mean, the process of de-dollarization has begun. These hotspots are now no more required, which is why they are reversing. So Russia is going to take over a substantial chunk of Ukraine, and it will be allowed. India will take over POK, the Pakistan occupied Kashmir, and it will be allowed. China will have, I mean, on a piecemeal basis, they will eventually take up the governance of Taiwan, and it will be allowed. And similarly, Iran and Israel will also close their conflict through this decade
Oh wow, I'm
because
getting
it's
goosebumps.
it's part of the script. It is part of the same single country reserve currency status closing to a multi-currency world order.
And so, when do you foresee? I guess I have two questions. So, when do you see that the financial reset is going to happen? And why do you think that? I know there are two different questions. And why do you think that Ukraine is is the part of the de-dollarization?
As I explained, these hotspots were created to continue the single country reserve currency status, pound and dollar.
Okay.
So first it was pound, and then after the Second World War it was the US dollar. So all these artificial hotspots were created for making the neighbors clash with each other. Okay,
Okay.
so
Okay. Okay.
one neighbor got dollars and arms, the other neighbor got sanctions. Okay,
Mhm. Okay.
so now that it is not required, each of these hotspots will reverse. That is what exactly is happening in Ukraine.
Okay. Cool. And so, when do you predict the financial reset is going to happen, and what's the impact?
To my understanding, I've already predicted this long back.
Mhm.
In the next 18 to 20 months, the IT sector and the banking sector in the West will completely wrap up. Wrap up means mergers and acquisitions. I mean, only few entities consolidating the entire business, right?
Mhm.
And after that, you will have the new currency formula, which most probably will have a central bank digital currency tied to gold.
Okay. And so, what do you think that impact of that is going to be on Europe and on Bharat?
Well, as long as Bharat is concerned, my understanding is a lot of Western companies are going to shift their operations because this is the last market available in the world where the young population is of this size, which can earn the money and spend it, both of it. Okay, so profit is a factor of production of consumption. Okay,
Mhm.
you might, I mean, the Western countries might have a lot of technology, but technology cannot consume products. So profits is about consumption. So most of these companies, I believe, by 2030 will shift a sizable chunk of operations into Bharat, and their top management will also eventually, change to from a white to an NRI and then to a resident party eventually.
Interesting. Interesting.
As
And
long as Europe is concerned,
yeah.
as I see Europe, including the rest of the West, they all have a lot of natural resources with them.
Okay.
So they will have to now think upon how they are going to build the manufacturing back. And in order to bring manufacturing back, they will have to trim the size of their economy, because at the current salary levels, you cannot have a made in US or a made in Canada product which the citizens we can buy. Okay. So till now, it was the West printing the currency and China torturing its citizens and getting it done at a low price. That will not be the future. So in the future, there will be China plus 10 in manufacturing, US dollar plus 10 in currencies, English language plus 10 in languages. That is how the multipolar world will go on.
Because you've mentioned that like that English will not be spoken like past 2030, if I'm yeah, if I'm
Yeah,
correct.
my understanding is technology will pave the way for a multipolar world and will help removal of English language as the main operational language of the world. That is what my understanding is.
It's
Okay.
fascinating. Okay. So I'm looking at the time, and I just want to ask you one more question before we get to the audience questions. So audience, please feel free to start shooting questions our way. Um, any connections that you are aware of between Bharat and Slovakia? So, from my understanding, as a country, we do support you guys joining the Security Council. There's apparently biofuel like we're supporting the free trade with European Union. We just had our foreign minister meet Jay Shankar a month ago. So, any kind of interesting insights that you might know, be aware of between the countries?
Well, I see a very big role for Bharat, not just for Slovakia, but a lot of the parts of Europe. Because when we move into the multipolar world, what is going to happen is, one of the predictions that I've done is that Europe is going to face crusades with the radicals that have entered in many of the western parts of Europe for sure. So my understanding is there will be crusades on street, and Bharat can be a role of balancing out both the parties and maybe help understanding, keeping the Mandir ecosystem and reducing out those kind of tensions, because Middle East as well. I mean, the West Asia right now, that they understand the importance of Sanatan economics. They have started building mandirs. Uh, they have adopted yoga and Ayurveda as well, because Ayurveda works on the root cause of the disease rather than the
Mhm.
Western template of allopathy, which only works on symptoms of the disease. Okay, but Ayurvedic requires patience. So I believe that a lot of Europe will be seeking Bharat again after 400 years, just like they came searching for us before 400 years back. So this time also they'll come searching back, but this time there's a very good possibility that a lot of learnings will bring positivity in Europe. As far as Slovakia is concerned, certainly the support is there for United Nations Security Council. We need to be there on that. Besides that, there are ancient connections with Slovakia as well in terms of the Indo-Russian, I mean, Indo-European proto languages connects a lot
Yeah.
of words that has derivations from Sanskrit. The spellings of words that comes from Sanskrit, Poland as well, Polish language, Russian as well. So all of them they comes from Sanskrit. I mean, the English word of brother comes from Sanskrit.
Mm.
Bratra is the Sanskrit word, right? From there, brother, father, all these words have come. Sister comes from Duhita, which is again a Sanskrit word. So a lot of languages are have their origins in ancient Bharat.
Yeah, fascinating. One more thing before we go. So you recently met Dr. J. Shankar. I'm a big fan, and I want to know what is he like in person before we move to questions.
So yeah, um, I mean, this kind of, I mean, the entire leadership is, very dynamic of the present government. There's one more leader, Smriti Irani ji. She is equally dynamic, and I certainly admire these people. Uh, this was a small meeting with the foreign minister, and he was on a tour to my state for the election campaigns and media interaction and stuff like that. They work really hard. A lot of food habits has changed. I got to know that now that he represents my state, which is Gujarat.
Okay.
So he was sharing how he now takes some more sweet content in food because Gujarati people eat a lot, like to eat a lot of sweets.
Me
So that food habit has changed. That was what he was sharing. And he also shared that very soon he'll pick up some of the Gujarati words as well and speak about it. If you look at the kind of the intellectual work that goes into this, not just foreign ministry, in fact, the entire team, but the foreign minister in and his team in particular,
too.
because a lot of geopolitical heft is shifting to Bharat. A lot of things which China cannot do, a lot of things which Russia cannot do, a lot of things which the US and its partners cannot do, Bharat can do. Probably Bharat is the bridgeway between the East and the West in a way, because we share some of the democratic values, or systems at least, with the West, whereas we also share some of the concerns of the Russian and the Chinese side in terms of balancing out, a better equitable society that we want to bring about,
Hmm.
rather than an Abrahamic economics, 5% holding 90%, that kind of a society. So we share those concerns as well. And Bharat is perfectly placed to play that role, hefty geopolitical role in the financial reset as well. To my understanding, when we go into a multi currency basket, the gift city in Gujarat will be one of the biggest uh, financial hub of the world. It will be the biggest financial hub in the world, as
Okay.
we are seeing a dilution of a lot of tech and finance capitals in the West. The New York, Chicago, California, London, Paris, Berlin, Sydney, Toronto, all these are diluting.
Okay.
So the only ray of hope is now Bharat.
I see. I see. Okay. Let's just shift gears. Let's take some questions from the audience. So, what do you think about Indian GDP in 2047? What indigenous principles would be at work as a catalyst in the Indian economy in the next 25 years?
So, Rohanji, the first one is the GDP index itself is wrong. It comes from the same Western template after the Second World War, Bretton Woods, because they had this endless printing machine. In the formula of GDP, they added consumption and investment because they can simply print the currency as much as they want because of the single country reserve currency status. So, to my understanding, GDP formula will be certainly not be existing in 2047. I can guarantee you that. Um, as far as principles that would be worked for the next 25 years, I believe the Prime Minister has been very clear that 1,000 years. So when he's saying 1,000 years, what does that mean is Sanatan, eternity, right? So whatever works for eternity will certainly work as a model for the 25 years as well. So we're going to see a lot of templates how we were living our lives going to change with the financial reset. Tier 2 and tier 3 cities becoming more and more stronger. The core sectors coming back, particularly farming, food processing, logistics, manufacturing, and all of these. Because understand, in ancient Bharat, uh, all the women were the richest business tycoons on earth. Understand that. Okay, because they were linked to the core sectors which were women dominated, be it the silk route, be it the textile, be it the spices. Understand, women empowerment began with agriculture because you have to settle at one place. That is why that word settle comes from agriculture. When we ask someone, did you get settled? When we ask someone about marriage, that comes from agriculture settlements. Okay? Because that is the starting point of women empowerment of the human civilization, the respect of monogamy that the lady gets in her relationship with the man. That started with agriculture. Okay? So the prime minister is looking at uh, the women empowerment in an entrepreneurship model. So as soon as the election gets over, don't be surprised if he announces schemes with a very low rate of interest loans for businesses to start up.
Cool. Thank you. Next question. How do you envision the trajectory of trade relations between India and Europe evolving in the next decade, particularly in the light of recent geopolitical shifts and economic policies?
So, Harshit ji, I see a fundamental problem in terms of, as I say, the Abrahamic economics runs by making a mob because they have commandments. Similarly, geopolitics also they get directly get orders from Washington. Okay, so I am not sure how much of Europe's decision actually Europe is taking. I'm not sure about it, to be very frank and honest. So while the relation, obviously, Bharat wants to have a very strong relations with Europe, but the decision making of Europe will have to have more choices. If they are able to take those choices, if they are able to elect those strong leaders who can talk for their own people, just like our prime minister does with full authority, uh, maybe the relations can get much better than what they are right now.
Cool. Next question. What is your opinion on increasing insecurity amongst the white population in US, where the whites are now in minority?
Well, this was very obvious because, again, as I said, the rights based concept of Abrahamic economics is totally a flawed model. So when the constitution says that you have one, two, three, four, five, six, seven rights, but that rights just because it is in the document does not mean you get the right. You, if you don't have the family numbers strength because of the birth rates, if you don't have community numbers strength, then you have no right on street. Understand that. Okay, so this Western template is a very flawed concept of putting rights in the constitution because the police or the judiciary or the state will only come after you complain. After the right, you are not able to exercise the right. They can only give you compensation. They cannot give you the right. Understand this concept. These are very flawed models which have come from the West. This constitution document and stuff like that. It doesn't work that way. On street, you need to have your family numbers strong. You need to have your community numbers strong if you want to exercise your right. The police, judiciary, and the state will only give you hearing after the accident happens, and they can only give you compensation. Okay, so well, the insecurity of the white population certainly going to increase. They have lost their birth rates. They deployed women for just temporarily shoring up their GDP. That's what the wrong model is.
Cool. And I think I just want to take one last question. We are very much running out of time here. But please inquire about a projection regarding distribution of population in the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Iran after 2030.
Projection regarding distribution of the populations. Well, to be very frank, what I see is de-dollarization will continue with the de-radicalization process because a lot of these Gulf countries have now realized that their half of their crude oil wealth just went into radicalizing Bharat and the West Asia just to keep the US dollar going in the reserve currency status, clashing with each other. Now that they realize this, they would want to de-radicalize, which is what Bharat is helping them with. So there are good chances of a sizable chunk, as I've predicted as well. It's correctly mentioned that there are chances of moving towards this direction.
Okay, fantastic. I think I will just close it for here right now. No more questions, but thank you, Dr. Shah, so much for your time. It has been really incredible. I hope it was as equally incredible for the audience as it was for me. Really a pleasure to have you on. I actually prepared gazillions of other questions that I didn't get the chance to ask you. But again, thank you so much for your time and for being here with us. Thank you, thank you.
धन्यवाद. जय
Thank
श्री
you.
राम.
Bye bye.
Bye.